The news of Phase 2 finally being complete came as the brand new ship was finally finished inside the brand new space dock from Bill. From the ship of Aya, she and Bill watched from the bridge as the new Cortana battleship cleared the docks and slowly moved to join the family fleet. On the outside, she looks just like Aya does. Same number of weapons, same placement. Yet on the inside, compared to the amenities Bill had set for himself and his crew, John had gone a different way, very militaristic and very, very Spartan. Cortana, at least on the inside, was more of an actual warship than Aya was. Yet no one cared as their mission was just about to begin. Bill brought everyone together, at least those who were going on the mission, and they jumped away. It'll be another 3 weeks in transit as the family fleet heads towards their targets. While in transit, there's plenty of meetings to go over the plan, go over new business. Though, when not in meetings, the transit is very, very boring. Some of the crew opted to stay in stasis for a long time. Others just wanted to enjoy their free time as they tried to study each other's biology in every single corner and corridor of the ship. The only area of true prohibition for such activities is the galley, for obvious reasons. Yet due to being stuck inside the ship with very little to do, it is noted that several times crew members will actually show up to eat their meals without a single stitch on, and they're with their partners, waiting for the time they can exit the galley and get back to whichever activity they're doing. Seeing all this going on, when Aya and a few others voiced their concern, Bill simply asked, "Which would you rather have? An eyeball full of flesh, or mopping up teeth after tensions get really high? Besides, there's going to be way more than enough fighting soon enough." While in transit, the family assault forces received a message that, once decrypted, made the comms officer actually run to Bill's quarters in the middle of the night. As the crewmate ran in, he screamed, "Priority message, sir!" Hearing this, Bill jumped out of his bed and grabbed the datapad. When he did, he also gave the crewmate an eyeful that slightly frightened her, and as Aya rolled out of bed and had already downloaded the message into her android form, she didn't know what to do. She immediately ran over to Bill, showing her proportions as she did so, and she looked over his datapad right over his shoulder to see if she got something wrong, as she couldn't believe what the hell she was seeing. The message detailed that 7 other sentient species had actually held a meeting, and most of them just wanted to negotiate. Apparently, Phase 2 had bigger of an impact than they realized. They want to now set up peaceful relations with humanity. Further down the message, there was a list of terms. The first ones, of course, seemed fair. An acknowledgement of humanity's sentience and strength. A public apology for treating Earth like garbage. A public apology for the invasions of Earth as well. A request for the immediate return of POWs. A territorial boundary for humanity and the foxy species that they protect. This one in particular actually came with a map that actually reached out well beyond humanity's current borders, almost doubling their territory. Another term was a full and complete halt to all hostilities from all sides. And of course, a non-aggression treaty/pact that they would make sure that they wouldn't be at each other's throats anytime soon. This list of species seemed to look really good. It surprised everyone that 4 of the 7 species that attacked humanity had already signed before they even sent the transmission. Yet the strongest, most vain, and most prideful species had not. The buffalo species had yet to sign until the POWs were returned, and that was non-negotiable. This is actually a sign of good faith to them. Since this is not an unreasonable request, the Council of Humanity's Planets and Colonies asked Bill to hold fast and wait on Phase 3. Bill, not being a complete idiot, immediately contacted the family fleet and redirected them all to an empty system. From there, everyone's just going to have to wait and stand by. Stand by for how long? They don't know. Weeks, months, maybe a couple of years, it doesn't matter. This, of course, annoyed the crew species as they all wanted to take their turn down on Earth and get some sunshine, some actual sunshine, some real fresh air. But it is what it is. They knew what it was all about. Within another 20 days passed, all the POWs were loaded on a few frigates. From there, the contingent of ships that had the 5 frigates carrying all the POWs along with their escorts, 2 cruisers and 2 destroyers, headed towards the edge of Buffalo space, from where they simply had to wait. Keeping to their word, Buffalo ships arrived for the transfer. Most ships are cargo frigates being escorted by a battleship and 3 destroyers. Both sides halt, and the POW carrying frigates slowly move forward. The Buffalo frigates followed the lead, and eventually they halted as they lined up side by side, almost bumping into each other. Tensions are extremely high as tethers reach out, grip onto the ships, and then umbilicals are extended out towards the pressure doors. The ships that are overwatching just sit there in space. They float as each side waited for a simple reason to power weapons and fire. Inside the ships that were performing the transfer, humans in their battle armor never, ever entered the umbilical. Instead, they simply opened the pressure doors and gave instructions via speakers. The POWs that heard them were a bit worried that they were about to get spaced, yet they had to be reminded that if they were going to be killed, they'd already be dead. This made them think, okay, perhaps. Then all their worries suddenly disappeared as the pressure doors opened and they walked all the way through the umbilicals to the other side. On the other side, they were actually surprised to see their own brethren. The Buffalo POWs were grateful to know that they're actually going to go home, yet the Buffalo on the frigates were surprised to see POWs of all the other species of the coalition. So many that the captains were concerned about supplies, yet extremely grateful that they now had a bargaining chip within their own political structure. Human cruisers and destroyers could only sit and wait. Sit and wait in silence as the transfer of multiple Buffalo ships continued. In some cases, they had to stop the transfer, which seemed to upset the POWs a lot. Close down the umbilical, retract all the tethers and whatnot, and then bring in another ship to load up. At one point, even the destroyers had to be loaded. It takes over 2 hours to finish the transfer to just one ship, and there's multiple ships to transfer to. Once completed, the human warbirds receive a message. A message from the Buffalo. You have held up your end of the deal. We will now uphold our end of our deal. Inside the following data package, you will find a certified copy of the new pact between our 2 species. Let this be the end of hostilities between our species. As the human frigates signaled that the transfer had been completed, a single line was sent to the Buffalo species before any human ships turned to go away. Well bargained and done. With this, only 2 more species held out. Human refused to actually sign the pact with either of them, as the continuing terms that they sent might as well just be terms for surrender. Those 2 species demanded a public apology for daring to defy them. A disarmament of all human ships, regardless of status. It didn't matter if it's a political ship, a civilian ship, a military ship, a cargo ship. It didn't matter. An oath of submission to the authority of those 2 species. A surrender of all human technology. A surrender of all crew, which they simply called slaves or servants. A surrender of all planets, colonies, stations, and docks. The human reply to this was, "You're either drunk, high, or stupid." With this, Bill now did not have multiple targets, no. He only had 2 targets. After confirmation, he turned the family fleet out, reorganized them, and then they took off into the void again to hit their targets. As the family fleet reached the final leg of their journey, many look over the specks of the enemy fleet. The fleets that attacked humanity had been very decorative, functional to a point, yet it's clear that their insistence on aesthetics made the ship far less capable than it should be. At one point, as Aya, Aki, and Malfina talked about the ridiculousness of the ship designs how they are, they commented on how nothing made sense. Finding themselves in a bind as their purely logical minds couldn't wrap around it, they simply turned towards Joe and Bill and asked them. Joe and Bill looked at each other for a moment before Joe turned and said, "It makes perfect sense when you think about it like a biological. These species are so concerned with the aesthetics of their stuff, they forget about the practicality portion. This we've seen throughout history. And apparently, either they forgot or they never learned, but they have to understand it's what's inside that counts." Bill interjected, "Besides, it's even clear looking at their own bodies. Look at this. They put so much into making things pretty. Their things, the things that they have, they want to show off, that they refuse to even think about expanding their own lives. Since they only allow themselves to live for, 200 years at most, at best, they're still full of piss and vinegar, like some kids. And soon enough, they're going to realize that youth and exuberance is absolutely no match for old age and treachery." Less than a week later, above the homeworlds of the reptilian and the insectoids, which were called Chi-Chi, there's a massive burst of energy that seems to erupt across space. Family battle groups jump in very close to the planet, so close that even in armor, the sudden gravitational shift breaks several restraints, sending crew and humans of all different shapes and sizes crashing into the deck, into the walls, the overhead deck, and even in a few cases, flying down the hallway through the door. The enemy sees this, and they are simply in shock. Nobody's crazy enough to do this. That's a quick way to die before you even get started. The home forces around the planet have no idea what to do. They're in shock at this moment. They don't have any heavy hitters to throw at this obvious invasion force. The reason being is the military ships are all considered rugged looking, almost bare bones, disgusting. And it's thought that the presence around their beautiful planets would be nothing more than an eyesore. The civilian ships, when you look at them, are all decked out as though they're in a parade, in severe contrast to the sleek, flying bricks of humanity that now floated right above their planets. A few moments later, across all bands, a warning went out to the planet below to vacate certain areas as human ships charged their main weapons. Unfortunately, only fixed weapons have the power to actually do what needed to be done, and the glow from the bow was evident as the ships rotated into position. 1 minute later, the ships fire. Energy beams break the atmosphere and leave a scorch on the planet itself, each shot burning a dark line into the surface as it melts the surface of the planet into glass. For the next 14 minutes, they continue to fire down with fixed cannons while the turrets rotate and lock onto any approaching ships. The turrets do not need to fire, as every ship targeted immediately does a flip and burn trying to get away, realizing that they're severely outgunned. As the lines begin to link together onto the surface, the human ships suddenly stop. Pause. You could see the cannons begin to cool. Then the fronts close, the ships turn around and simply leave, jumping away and just leaving their works behind. Now at this point, everybody knows that Phase 1 of the counterattack was to cut off the supply of slave labor. This would force those overly vain assholes to do the work for themselves. Many folks actually laughed at the idea of any coddled rich kid forced to suddenly have to raise their own food or have to perform maintenance on a vehicle. The absurdity of them trying to actually do this makes everybody laugh, as the constant jumping around trying to figure out what's going on will be like watching a monkey try to fuck a football. Phase 2 was a way to actually shut down the logistics, whereas the halting of the genocide was a side benefit. FYI, the aquatic world was now inside known human territory, thanks to the non-aggression pact, that is. With the logistics supply cut off, they no longer actually have the ability to simply make what they desire. Now they must conserve, repair, recycle, reuse, and maintain in order to survive. It's possible that honest work might aid in their development as a species. Phase 3, however, it's all about psychological warfare. Now they know that their own homeworlds are not safe, and they will have to divert all more resources to the defense of it. There's also the fact that the areas on the planet that are scorched are not populated areas. It's clear, even to a complete novice, that the populated centers were actually avoided specifically. Yet the idea that an enemy fleet could just appear, strike like that, has to be extremely sobering. Yet not nearly as sobering as seeing the burn marks from space. Even though these burn marks will last at most a century or two, they will leave an impression. On the Chi-Chi homeworld, one would actually be hard-pressed to figure out what the symbols that are burned into the planet mean. That is, until you rotate the ships and see what they can. There is a colon right above a capital D. On the reptilian planet, it's a bit more straightforward, as there is a giant circle that wraps around the northern section of an entire continent. Within it is the good old-fashioned smiley face, thinking about what they actually just drew onto the face of the planet, which most everybody just want to do a mustache and get it over with, but you need pareidolia for that, but it wouldn't work. Now, both species, when they go in to deal with all the rest, will be teased about this for centuries as they make the planets look so ugly. And it makes them look like trash. On the way back, Bill reads a communication that says that the Chi-Chi have decided to agree to the same pact as the others. The reptilians, however, still refuse, mainly out of pride. Bill immediately comments, "Pride go before a fall." Aya even turned and looked at him when he said this, and he continued with, "Yet it makes sense. I mean, vanity is a form of pride, right? I mean, now their vanity has been damaged, and so is their pride, so yeah, it makes sense they wouldn't want to give up." Back in human territory, humanity itself may not have been able to take on all the other species if they played defense, yet they took a chapter from a very old book, and they listened to what the man said when he said, "Look strong when you are weak, and look weak when you are strong." Humanity looked weak as a backwater species when they were attacked, but were strong enough to defend. Now that they've been weakened to the point where another attack like that would probably break them, they needed to show that they were strong. They needed to appear strong and stronger than all the others combined. As they listened close through all the listening posts and satellites they set up, they listen close to the chatter, and it's clear that the other species actually now fear humanity. They would like to lash out and face their fears, but now they lack resources to build up their fleets due to the lack of harvesters, as there's not a single one left. Humans were very efficient. They also now lack all their slaves due to the loss of the cloning facilities. Plus, there is the insistence from humanity that any crew species that is able to enter human space will be able to find a place with their kin. And with this words going around, more and more the crew species are simply stealing ships and taking off to human species. And now they're losing ships without the ability to actually fully crew the ships they have. The best news, however, is coming from the latest post in that the crew species has actually been treated much better, even inside enemy territory, since they can no longer be easily replaced. The other species have now begun to take care of the crew species, and this will definitely aid in them living much longer, especially since crew species were usually used until they simply dropped. Now they need to be maintained. Hopefully, they'll survive long enough for all the crew species of the Lafande sector, which is a population number much higher after the raid on Camino, and of course grabbing the survivors from the Harvester factory. The rumor is that the crew species are already making a 10-year plan to terraform the planets of the Lafande system. Then, they are going to create or purchase ships from humanity and begin raids. Raids designed for one purpose, to get their people out. However, because it's a non-aggression pact, humanity cannot aid them at all, not either can the AI. They'll have to figure it out for themselves. But that will be their war, not humanity's. At this point in humanity's war, which you have to put in quotes, they only need to defend themselves against a single, solitary, weakened enemy. And the war at this point is essentially over. On the bridge of his ship, Bill and Aya contemplate the victory humanity has fought so long for. They also think about what they're going to do. There's not going to be any more dumpers coming to throw anything on the planet that they can harvest or collect or whatever it might be. But there's so much debris to be salvaged, it's still going to take near millennia to clean it all up. And by then, it's pretty safe to assume that humanity is going to find either a way to find more materials or simply recycle what they have. This means that humanity's future is pretty well set. And while Aya rests her head against Bill's chest, she says, "Now that the war's over, maybe we can finally stay on Earth for a while. Perhaps even settle down on that farm you had?" Bill grins a little bit, holding her close. "As long as we keep one of those islands of the archipelago just for us." He can actually feel her grin at that point as she says, "Sounds good, but perhaps not just us." Bill turns and looks down and says, "You got something in mind?" She looks up and says, "Perhaps. I was just thinking about raising kids on the surface this time instead of in orbit." Bill thinks for a second and gets a big grin. "Well, they won't get the hands-on experience of salvage down there, but I'm pretty sure we could actually bring them up once they're old enough." Aya pulls back so she can look directly into his eyes and says, "So that's a yes?" Bill says, "Of course it's a yes. I already know you make a great mother. I've seen it happen before." Aya smiles really, really wide. "I'll get everything set up. We'll have to sort out the process later, of course. Still, we still have to bring the gestation pods down, and we have to get a house ready, and everything like that." Bill puts his hand up to her lips and touches it just a little bit, just to get her to stop talking. Says, "I know. When we get down to Earth, I'll make sure you have everything we're gonna need, okay? To include enough fresh genetic material to work with." That's when Aya giggled a bit and said, "I look forward to it." At that moment, the ship comes out of FTL. They both look out at the blue and green ball slowly rotating in space. They fly past a lot of debris that is still getting collected from the battle, yet the area around Earth is completely clear. Aya says, "I still am surprised and grateful that those idiots chose to begin dumping on this planet." Bill looked forward and said, "Me too," as he squeezes her body a whole lot closer to his. Just like no one will ever think of you as obsolete ever again, Earth will never again be considered a garbage planet. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me today on the final chapter of this ongoing series. Now, before I go, I need to say that today's winner has been Alan Williams, and I also need to send out some very special thank yous to the supporters of the channel, and those will be Prozac and Pancakes, Sir, SS Demon, MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Guardian Sage, Brian Kemp, The Lockeen, and Joseph Bosch. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.